people having self-responsibility for their children?
I believe, madam, that children are the responsibility of their parents and nobody else. I do not accept that somebody takes responsibility of his neighbour's children. That it is for the parents to take responsibility of their children, and that's how it should be. And the more self-responsibility that we have in Europe, and indeed the world, the better the place would be, in my view.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what you say there, and especially kind of as it pertains to like inefficiencies. But in terms of that second clip that I played out there about the having self-responsibility for other people, I think this is actually more of an ethical point, and I'll just go over just one of the key points made there, which was, I do not accept that somebody takes responsibility for their neighbor's children. It's for the parents to take responsibility for their children, and that's how it should be. And I think that is a very important point because, okay, it might sound to somebody who hasn't really gone into the ethics of libertarianism or the ethics of anarchism to say, oh, well, that sounds callous. It sounds like a callous point. But actually, all we're saying and all I think that is being explained in that point is, should someone have the right to steal from you to give to someone else? Should someone be able to shake you down and say, I'm going to take your money and give it to this person because they're needy? I mean, they might be more needy, and it might be objectively true that if someone comes down, on the street to you, you're walking along the street, and they say, "Oh, you've got a really nice, expensive jacket there. Let me just take it off your back and give it to a homeless person because they don't have much money and they're more needy and they can actually buy food, etc. with it." Well, that might be true. That person might get more out of that. You don't really need the velvet jacket or whatever, but actually, you've just committed a fundamental ethical wrong by doing that, even if it ultimately has a positive outcome. So I'm interested to know whether you look at libertarianism in the same way, in that it's more of an ethical question actually than an economic question or a question of efficiency.
Yes, I do. I take a very strong moral view. I think it is immoral to take money from somebody under the threat of violence, which is what tax is, to give to somebody else, whether it's a good cause or not. That isn't the point. But of course, if you leave more money for the individual, you'll see more philanthropy. Now, if I had been left a lot more money over the years, I once worked out how much I'd paid in tax since I left school, came to well over 2 million. Stocking it all up. I did it 10 years ago as an exercise on a long train journey. I just worked it all out. Very big booze bill, I'm afraid. So a lot of the tax went on booze. But that doesn't mean to say I would abrogate my responsibilities morally. So, for example, if I had a neighbor who had fallen on hard times, or there was who had a child with cerebral palsy or something like that, I would help out. As a traditional Christian, I would regard it as my moral duty to help out. But not at the point of a gun, not under threat of imprisonment. I don't need that to make me do my duty as a traditional Christian. But so I would look after people. Now, for example, I have sponsored sport. I've been sponsoring junior sport in one way or another for years. I don't now, but I did. Mini rugby, junior rugby. I sponsored Cambridge University women's rugby for 10 years. I've spent quite a lot of money on youngsters' sports. So, I do my whack, and I've done other charities as well. But that's my business. It's nobody else's business that I do that. And I think more people, and if you look at the amount that we still give in this country per capita, the British are the most generous nation. I think of every single nation, we give more, sometimes naively and stupidly. We put our hand in the pocket. As soon as we see the red nose day on the telly, or we see this, I'm trying to lead the charge on never give. My motto is never give money to a charity if the CEO earns more than you do. And I was asked the other day for a charity, not particularly well-known charity, but it was big enough. And the first thing I did is I checked out to see what the CEO earned, and the CEO is earning £120,000 a year, which in retirement is more than I'm earning. So he doesn't get any money. If they can afford to pay a CEO or save the children or Save the Planet, all these charities. If you look at what the CEOs are earning, sometimes 250,000 pounds a year. Well, they clearly don't need my money, do they?
Mm-hmm.
If they can pay their executives, and then people say, oh, we've got to get the best people. Then you look at the CV of these people. Failed Liberal Democrat politicians. All the riffraff and flotsam and jetsam of society, of political society, Jobsworths, Quangos. All these people are just ghastly. They're not getting my money. But I do give money. When I was in office, I didn't take the salary and I didn't take the pension, non-contributory pension. And the attendance allowances I gave to local charities. So, for example, we have a charity not that far away that rescues greyhounds, and it's run by a lady who lives in a shack with all these greyhounds. You give her 100 quid, the 100 quid goes straight to the greyhounds, the abandoned greyhounds or dogs. Right. You give it to the RSPCA, you've got a whole bunch of people on £200,000 a year with an index-linked pension who don't need it. So local charity, and that comes back full circle, if you will, to libertarianism. And am I an anarcho-capitalist, if you will? Which is a good question. I'm never quite sure. But if you keep local government small, if you keep your government, such government you need, small and unpaid, so it's pro bono publico. My father was a bigwig in the Conservative Party in London as a councillor. They didn't dream of getting paid. There were no expenses. It was pro bono publico. And so consequently, we need to get back to that. Cantons in Switzerland, for example. Now, Switzerland isn't perfect, make no mistake. I know it's not perfect. But Switzerland is much closer to representative democracy than we'll ever be. Because I don't have anything, nobody has anything in common with members of parliament in Westminster. But if it was local, if the local publican or the local builder, somebody local, and we had a small little board of directors for Howdenshire. I live in Howdenshire, which is a sort of subdivision of the East Riding of Yorkshire, which is a subdivision of Yorkshire, if you will. So we'd all know each other. The advantage in Switzerland is that they all know each other. They know the guy is good. They know the guy's not on the take. They know the guy is sensible. So that's the kind of, then we do need some administration, and it can't get out of control because we're all in charge of it. We're all running it. At the moment, they don't care what we think because they know we're stuck. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere for us to run to. And it doesn't matter if we vote for Starmer or vote for Sunak because they're both WEF. So why would they care what we think? They don't care. So they would care if they could, if they were responsible and we met them on the tube. I remember Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's a sort of controlled opposition fake kind of woman who pretends that she's poking the establishment and deep state, but she's part of the system. Matt Hancock, the appalling Matt Hancock, he was jostled on the tube and she was outraged. We can't have our politicians jostled. He killed hundreds and hundreds of old people with his appalling, arrogant strategies through COVID. Jostled any other country, and it wouldn't jostled him on the tube. They'd have strung the bastard up. So, yeah, they should get jostled. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? If you're a crooked politician, you're going to get jostled. And worse, if I'd seen the bugger.
Yeah, I mean, in one of my first conversations I had on the podcast, it was with someone called Richard Nichols, and he said that in his where he lives, it's a relatively small community, and they lost all telecommunications for something like a week, and it wasn't getting fixed, and it was the responsibility apparently of the politician. They took him out into the woods and gave him a phone, and by the time he came out of the woods, it was all sorted again. It just it took a bit of a shakedown, but I guess that's the kind of society that emerges from having more of a smaller kind of community-driven society, and maybe that's where we should go. Maybe we should actually, maybe the problem is that government works up to a certain scale, and then it stops working. And I think that the smaller the better, really. I mean, I do consider myself to align with the ethics, at least, of anarcho-capitalism. When it comes to actually in practice, would it work? I don't know. I don't know if it's ever really been tried to the point that we can actually say, okay, that was a good experiment. But I think the smaller the better. And I think you can actually look at, you know, data around the world and the way different countries are doing things and say that does work. And you know, this also ties in as well to what you were saying about in terms of kind of charity and things like that. You know, you are much more likely, I think, in a world where government doesn't exist to kind of take away all of our responsibilities for other people. I think it's much more likely that people will do things for their local community. You know, if you're paying taxes and you're every year you say, oh my God, you know, like 50% of my income is being paid to taxes. Well, then you don't have that much of a kind of impulse to say, I'm going to go and take what's left and go and give it to causes that I care about. But if you're not having that money taken by government, then you say, well, it's my responsibility. Who's going to do it? If, you know, if not me, who? You know, that doesn't exist when you're in this kind of extreme kind of socialist paradigm. So yeah, I just think that the outcomes would be better in that world as well, because, you know, everything would become more local, and it would breed a kind of personal responsibility into society that necessarily has to be actualized.
You have to have you see, it worked with John Cooperthwaite in Hong Kong post-war because the Chinese had a work ethic. And I know some people have work ethics and some people don't have work, and some are stronger than others. But you see, you soon get a work ethic if you've got an empty tummy. If you're perfectly healthy, but you're getting as much for watching daytime TV on the sofa as you would be picking sprouts in November in North Yorkshire, you're not going to pick sprouts in North Yorkshire. But if you can't pay your TV, you can't afford your mobile phone, you can't afford to go out for a drink and all the rest of it because you're not working, which is how Hong Kong worked post-war. John Cooperthwaite used to say, my job is to make sure the drains work and the police aren't corrupt. That's it. And of course, the income per capita overtook virtually the rest of the world in one generation. It can be done. It can be done, but you need your role model, and I would suggest you could do no worse than John Cooperthwaite's post-war Hong Kong. But everybody thinks that the state must look after them. And I did a lecture once at York University, and I'm going back well over 10 years. And as a serving politicians, and I said, look, you know, do you I'm a politician, here I am, a real live politician making law, or in the amending chamber of the parliament. I won't go to that sort of rabbit hole, but there we are. I'm making law for you and your family. Do you think I can make law for the benefit of you and your family better than you can make it for yourself? And horrifyingly, they all went, oh. And a lot of them said, oh, well, I think that, yeah, I think the state can do that better than I could do. Where do people's self-confidence go?
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.